G'day everybody, my name is Eric and welcome to another Subsweek here on the Pagan Perspective. I can't believe how fast it's come around. I hope you all had a wonderful equinox and that you're looking forward to Beltane or to Samhain, depending on what part of the world you live in. This week we're doing Choose Your Own Adventure again, so I'm going to be revisiting the topic of spirit communication. So this was a two-parter. I'll leave the full text, of course, in the description below. But Shadow's Son just wants to know, does spirit communication play a part in our practice? And Althaea Ratliff, the religion, if I said that correctly, great name, has asked about general communication with spirits and feeling spiritual energy through body parts. They're saying that they feel it through their right leg, and they have a friend who feels it through their spine. So this is interesting. I want to maybe start this conversation just by defining that term spirit and what I'm actually talking about when I use that word. It's very important, I think, in these spaces that we do talk about our semantics so that we're all on the same page about what we're actually saying. So when I'm using spirit in this video, I'm talking about any kind of spiritual entity. These could be elemental beings, they could be gods, they could be saints, they could be angels, any number of different kinds of things. They could be deceased loved ones, but I'm not limiting myself solely to that interpretation of the term. I think that maybe, I haven't rewatched the videos that the main host did on this topic, but I think that maybe because of my experience in Solomonic magic and even my very limited experience in voodoo spaces, I might have like somewhat of a different perspective from the other hosts in relation to this topic. So I'm hoping that maybe I will say something a little bit different to what you've heard maybe from our previous hosts. Now, I practice Solomonic magic as my main system of professional magic, the ones that I do for work. And so evocation is definitely like my main form of manifestation, of spell work. And so I often do that through mixed Kabbalah or Solomonic conjure, which, same thing, different name. So in my practice, yes, spirit communication is absolutely imperative. And I think that if you're in a spirit model, if you're in any sort of tradition that has spirits, I think a form of spirit communication is going to be really important for you. I think it's one of the most important things in your practice, is some way to communicate with them. But I want to say, like, that doesn't always have to be conventional methods of spirit communication. This does not have to look like 1920s spiritualism. It doesn't have to be a seance. You can interact with spirits in a number of different ways. And I think as well, when we look at those classical systems, like the grimoires, what we're seeing is not spiritualist techniques being used. You see almadels and drawing spirits into crystals and creating like spiritist loci, places for the spirits to stand, the use of black mirrors, those sorts of things. That's what we're actually seeing, these show stones and things like this is what we're seeing as the mode of operations for those grimoires or Solomonic magicians. So they're not using those same techniques. Now, what is interesting though is that they quite often employ a scryer, and I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself in my notes here. But Solomonic magic often includes the use of a scryer. So the person doing the evocation is not always the person who's receiving the contact from the spirit. That's quite often a different role to the person who's actually doing the evocation. So evocation can be one-sided. You can definitely evoke a spirit and do its, make your commands and all that sort of thing and have that whole experience with never actually receiving contact from the spirit back, and it's just a one-sided evocation. I think, though, like, that's why divination of some sort is so imperative for all magicians, for all magical users, for all spiritual people. Having some form of divination is imperative, because it's a way by which you can communicate with the spirits if you're not, like, clairvoyant or clairaudient or using those spiritualist techniques. It gives you an alternate way of approaching these things, because I think as well, like, not all people can perceive spirits. Just like not all spirits can represent themselves to all people, or at least that's my belief. All of my statements are anecdotal, right? Like, I only have personal experience to speak for this stuff. But that's what I've found is that not all spirits can reveal themselves to all people, and not all people can see all spirits. It just seems to be the way it is. People are, like, I guess, tuned into different frequencies, I guess is one way that we would put it, right? Now, on the topic of feeling physical sensations to identify spirits, this is an interesting one for me as well. So in my experience, there's only one spirit that I've had this kind of experience with, and it's always the same spirit that I have that experience with them. So this is Azuli Freda from the voodoo traditions, the Loa. So it is with her that I have this specific tell that I know that she is trying to communicate with me. So I'd be interested in asking the person who asked this question whether they have this same experience with just one spirit, or whether this is like all spiritual beings, or even like, I guess, the aura of a room or something. Is it always the same physical response, or do you have like different responses to different spirits? Because that's something that I've seen, especially within that voodoo system. Of course, if memory serves, like the grimoires don't mention any sort of physical sensations or anything like that. And again, they mostly implement like the use of young scryers, young boys and things, to actually do the communication aspect of it while they do the evocation. And most of the grimoires, the text, like the words, the incantations that are used, they mostly talk about like appearing in manifestation, appearing in full form, and commanding the spirit to do so. So it's like the expectation is not, I'm going to feel a sensation in my body, or I'm going to have this intuitive response or anything like that. Like, it's not, that's not the expectation, that's not the desired outcome. The desired outcome is full manifestation corporeally, so that you can interact with them. But of course, you know, there is also that, like, use of spiritus loci, putting the spirit on a place where they can stand to speak to the magician's scryer. And of course, you know, a magician can act as a scryer as well, but from my experience, it's much easier to do one or the other than trying to do both at the same time. It can be a bit tricky. Now, one other way that spirit communication has a role in my practice, or maybe more so in the past than it does now, because this is definitely something that's more geared toward group work, which isn't something I'm, you know, as involved in anymore. But full body possession is a great way to have a really visceral contact and interaction with the spirit. So we might call this drawing down in witchcraft spaces, or I think more recently in like reclaiming traditions, you know, aspecting of gods. So it's where you take on the persona of a god, you become possessed by them, and you are acting as them for that time. And this is a great way for people to interact directly with the spirits and to receive wisdom or guidance from them. So this was something that was very big and important in my coven when I was working in a group, was this transpossession and direct communication and filling of the vessel with the gods. And it's quite potent, it's quite, you know, amazing stuff that it's unlike anything else, I think, that I've ever experienced or seen before. And again, you know, like, full body possession is something that you would typically associate with traditions like voodoo, where the host is ridden by the loa, and, you know, they come through the head and all those sorts of things. So there's definitely something that we'd typically associate with that, but I think there's some evidence for it in these other traditions as well. So I am definitely, you know, I definitely have some experience with full body possession. Now, I'm not sure if I mentioned this already, but it's in my notes, so I'll say it again. I think spirit communication is very important. My main approach to spiritual communication is through the tarot. That is the technique or the technology that I like the best, or that I am the best at, when trying to have interactions with spirits. I hope, though, that this has given you some sort of exciting insights or some fun things to Google and look into. But yeah, this has sort of been my thoughts on spirit communication and my experience with that in my practice and my path. So I hope that this has answered the questions as best I could. I hope that you guys are all well, and until I speak to you next time, all the best.